story that, can everyone hear me? This is good.
Yeah.
About Faro, which is a property that I built the building. It was no great insight. It was a great mistake. It was about 40 acres of property that Antonia conned me into giving to me for nothing, He said, Bob, you can have this land for nothing, we just want you to develop. So when anyone says you can have something for nothing, look for the exit signs. It doesn't matter if it's raining, get out of the room, because the property, oh my God, it was such a sight. I had to take the top of a mountain off. It was up in the middle of nowhere. Thank Jesus I found this Faro. But I got into it and I did a great job, because at the end of the day, you have to do a great job. Sometimes it's not about money. It's about your reputation and making sure you follow through. It's hard to talk without questions. I started as a plumber. I started, Mrs. Monroe was the lady's name. I was Steuben Street off of East Main Street in Bridgeport. It was only, I was only 21, 22 years old. I was working as a plumber. And this poor mother was on welfare. She was a black mother, and she had 3 beautiful black little boys. And they were crying their eyes out because they couldn't use a John. And I showed up to clean out her John. And I was cleaning out her John, and she was hanging on my arm saying, thank you, Jesus, for sending me the plumber. And I always remember the kids, I remember her name, I remember everything about it. Because it said to me that it doesn't matter what you did in life, you could be of service to other people. So the whole thing started with service. So that was the seed. That's the seed of service. That you want to serve other people. And if you really have that, and you really believe that, then you're going to be very successful. Okay, but if you don't believe it, you're not going to be successful. You people are putting in your time here, so I feel like I'm committed that I need to tell you something meaningful when people put in time, because time is your only real asset. You can't make it go faster, and you can't make it go slower, and you can't plow it. Okay, it's time that you put in, like you're here tonight, you're making the time, you're putting in an investment in yourself. You want to be a better person. You want to do a better job. So I think it's meaningful that we try to pass things on to you. And the one thing I'd like to pass on to you is the pronoun we. I think when you talk about what you do, you want to always use the pronoun we. We do this, we do that. You got to get I out of your vocabulary. The other day I was showing some space to a tenant, and I said, we do this, and we do that. And Joe Delco was there, and he's in charge of all my facilities. And he jumped in, he says, well, we also do this, and we also do that. Now, if I was using the pronoun I or me, Joe wouldn't feel comfortable jumping into the conversation and helping out with the sales pitch. And when you go to interview people, or when people talk to you, focus on that pronoun. When I interview a person, if it's always I, or these guys says, oh, we do this, we do that, it tells you a lot about the person. So I think it's an important pronoun to remember. And if you take anything away from this thing, next time you use the pronoun I, ask yourself, could you have used the pronoun we? And then you're going in the right direction.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And Bob, your story about your hole in your sock reminds me of my first interview. First suit I ever owned. And I showed up at the interview. This was an interview at People's Bank, where I started my banking career. And I didn't realize I had one brown sock and one black sock on. And I had read one of these books about confidence, and you walk into the room and you sit with your legs crossed and look confident. And of course, my brown and black socks showed. Anyway.
Don't look now.
I haven't done that again. Phil, thanks for the introduction, and I also want to thank my team at Liberty, led by Sonia Myers, who's sitting over there, and I see Pat, I see Bob Stabile, and several of our other managers. Thanks for, first of all, participating in this program. from what I saw, it's a terrific program. Also, I know that, I think now I'm the last speaker of your morning, after Bob, after lunch, so you're probably ready to head out and head back home. And something I always like to do when I'm a luncheon speaker is to kind of warm the crowd a little bit by sharing a little story that I heard along the way. And this is a story about four Catholic ladies who were just came outside of church one Sunday morning, and they were bragging about their four sons. First Catholic lady wants to tell about her son. She says, "My son is the priest of the largest church in town, and when he walks into the room, everyone calls him Father." And if you've heard this, wait until the end to laugh. The second Catholic lady says, "Well, my son is a bishop for the whole state, and when he walks in the room, everyone calls him Your Grace." The third Catholic lady said, "Well, my son is a cardinal for the whole country, and when he walks in the room, everyone calls him Your Eminence." Well, the fourth lady wasn't sure what to say, and she said, "Well, my son is 6'3", handsome as all get out, muscle bound, handsome as anything, and when he walks in the room, all the ladies say, 'Oh my God.'" There's so many parallels about what Bob was mentioning and what I heard this morning about leadership, and there are a couple of things that I would have you take away. The first is the importance of community. You never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. In my case, it was precisely because of my involvement in community that I ended up becoming a banker. And so let me tell you the story. It goes something like this. I grew up down the street in public housing, not far, Success Village. Some of you may be familiar with it. 6 brothers and sisters. I comment to my children today very often that the garage in my house, one bay of the 3-car garage in my house is larger than the house that I grew up in. And but at the time we never knew we were poor. We didn't know that we were tight. It was just how things were. And everyone had 6 or 7 kids back then. Went to public high school, but at the time the military draft was in effect and the Vietnam War was going on. And so my family couldn't afford to send anyone to college. I chose to join the Army, which is what my father had done. And I thought that my familiarity with helicopters, because of Sikorsky aircraft, I thought, gee, being a helicopter door gunner sounds like fun. And so that was what I did in Vietnam for 13 months. Long and short of it is 3 years later I came back. There were no jobs. The economy was very bad. You recall back in the 70s, the economy was really not good around here. Plus, Vietnam veterans were not well thought of at all at that time. And I was an African-American male from a public housing project, so not very many things going for me. However, couldn't get a job. What I did do was volunteer. My mother had always made sure that we volunteered from when we were kids. And I volunteered for the Red Cross. And so you never know where your opportunity is coming from. I went down to Pennsylvania during Hurricane Agnes and spent about 2 months there volunteering for the Red Cross, mainly because I didn't have anything else to do, but also because I was always interested in helping people. Fast forward 3 or 4 months, I come back home, and I became the Volunteer of the Year for the American Red Cross in Fairfield County. I attended the dinner reception. I had never done that before. And lo and behold, sitting next to me is the chairwoman of volunteers, B.J. Goodspeed. And on the other side of me is her husband, Nick Goodspeed. Nick Goodspeed of People's Bank, the CEO of People's Bank. At the time I didn't know that. And we sat down and had a nice conversation, just like I'm having with all of you. Little did I know that he was interviewing me during the time, but he was. And at one point he asked me what I was doing for work. And I said, I don't have a job. Why, do you have one for me? And he kind of laughed and, very stately gentleman. 2 weeks later, I get a letter in the mail. Would you like to come and explore career opportunities at People's Bank? So you never know where your opportunities are going to come from. The second thing, the importance of them, Bob, you talked about we and how you communicate and how you talk with people. I had always been able to, mainly because my mother made us, we were always forced to talk to our neighbors and anyone who came to our house, and of course when we went to church on Sunday we always had to participate. But I was able to have a nice dialogue with him, and I think the reason why he was interested in me was because of that. I started as a part-time teller at People's Bank, eventually became a full-time teller, eventually became a branch manager, eventually became a region manager and a zone manager, it goes up along those lines. And all along the way, though, I never stopped volunteering and always stayed connected to community, whether it's through the United Way, where I had a long, long history, and many other community organizations. And I share that with you, the importance of community added to you never know where the next opportunity is going to come from, because 22 years after being with People's, very successful career, I was recruited by Fleet Bank here in Connecticut. Any of you remember Fleet Bank? You don't know. Remember the reputation they had? Not too good, right? I was recruited to run the state of Connecticut for them, which was a very big job for me, and it was a big jump in my career. But the reason why I was selected to lead Connecticut for them had probably very little to do with my banking skills, had a lot to do with my reputation as being involved in the community. And they saw it as an opportunity to showcase someone for their company that was human, had connections to the community. So community connections are really important. I worked with them for 10 years. I said at the beginning, my life story is very similar to many of yours. It's had lots of ups, lots of downs, and lots of successes and failures and disappointments as well. I was with Fleet for about 10 years. I mean, very successful, stayed connected to the community, and about 9 years in, I was promoted to chairman of Connecticut and president of Connecticut, and had lots of people working for me. I was basically at the zenith of my career. But every now and then life throws you a curveball that you don't expect. And I had 3 young children, one in freshman in college, one a junior in high school, and one in elementary school. And one day my wife came home and said to me, honey, I have a pain in my side. And the long and short of it is, I said, well, you need to go to the doctor. She said, well, I will, I'm going in a few weeks. A year later, she passed away from dying from cancer. So my career went from being on top of the world to being on the bottom of the world. But I still went to work every day. I told my children that they had to do the same. And a year later, Bank of America bought Fleet Bank. Another challenge. And this has to do with, for those of you that think disappointments don't happen, they do. But bless you, depending on what happened, depending on how you manage them, they can turn into something very positive. Bank of America came along and said, we love you, you're a good manager, we want you to work for us. I did for a couple of years, and then along came Charlotte, not the woman, like some of you may be thinking, but the city down in North Carolina, where Bank of America was headquartered. And one morning, my new boss came up to me and said, we love your work, we want you to come and run half the country for us down in Charlotte. Now, I just lost my wife a year earlier. I had my entire support network here, and I was just learning how to, make breakfast and do laundry and things like that. And I said no, nicely, but I said no. And they said, well, thank you very much. We don't need your services anymore. So 30 years into a very illustrious career, I lost my job and my wife in 1 year. It turned out to be, losing the job turned out to be a good thing. The message here is stay true to yourself. If your family is important, your values are important, there are going to be opportunities that come along that look too good to be true, but if they conflict with who you are, don't take them. So I was out of a job, and I was recruited to start a bank down in New Haven. I went from being the head of the biggest, largest institution in Connecticut to the smallest bank in Connecticut with an employee of one, me. And it was interesting that precisely because I had put together a business plan, because I had done a market feasibility study, because I was able to talk about banking and understood banking from the ground up, that I was recruited by Liberty Bank to join their company. There were 40 executives that were applied for the job from all over the country, and I think my board of directors saw or appreciated the fact that I wasn't talking about what other people were going to do. I was talking about, when they asked the question, if you were running the bank, what would you do? I said, well, if we were working together, and I laid out the market because I had just done a market feasibility study for who was going to be their competitor. The other element that was important was that bank, Liberty, wanted someone who was connected to the community, because we are a community bank, been around for almost 200 years, and I kind of fit the bill by staying close to the community. So the final message there, particularly for you younger folks that I see sitting around that think that your journey is going to be without bumps, forget it. It will. It will have a lot of bumps. But don't take those bumps as disappointments. Take those bumps as opportunities, because that's exactly what they will be. So thank you all. That's kind of my story.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you. Before we have to get back in the arc, how much time do we have here?
Maybe 7 or 8 minutes.
7 or 8 minutes, okay. So I'm sure we're all struck with the humbleness that you both talked about your stories here today. Bob talked about his plumbing life and the impact that had on him as a leader. And Chandler, you talked about having everything and losing almost everything and finding your way back. So the attribute that I see in both of you is humbleness. And I think any really good leader has a humbleness about them. Here's my first question. Somewhere in your childhood, you probably started forming some of your attributes on what it was to be a leader. You both came from difficult environments. You maybe had some role models that you wanted to follow. Could you tell us a little bit about what some of those early thoughts were on what a leader could be, and how did you wrap yourself around those for us?
I don't think it works that way. I think the first thing you have to do, you have to be a leader of yourself. First yourself. You got to learn to love yourself and take care of yourself. You have to read good books, exercise, watch what you eat. You have to be disciplined. It all starts with yourself. You can't ask someone else to love you if you don't love yourself and you don't respect yourself. So that's where it begins. Then once you have that quality, once you have the confidence, that you are a good person. I like to say every day I get better. Okay? You know, and being humble, I have something on my desk to become my office that must be read every day about how humility is the number one. Aristotle said that humility is your number one virtue. Okay? You gotta be humble. You know? So it starts with yourself, and then you begin the leader by example, by not talking behind people's back and those things, you know, but it starts that way.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said, Bob. The only thing I would add is always remember, people don't remember what you say, they remember how you made them feel. And when you're thinking about what leadership is, you're not a leader unless other people are willing to work with you. And people aren't willing to work with you unless you make them feel good, unless you make them feel like they're making a contribution. One of the pet peeves that I have at the bank, everyone here at the bank that knows me knows this, I hate it when someone interrupts someone else, particularly in a meeting. What I have found over my career is usually the quietest person in the room has the biggest contribution to make. And very often, including the leader, very often talks over that person. So to me, it's about making people feel like, I heard earlier this morning, that they're making a contribution, and not just, you know, coming to work every day, but making them feel like they're valued and what they're doing is important, no matter what role they perform for you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question. There's one from the crowd that you would like to ask. We'd rather hear you than me up here, so be thinking of something that you'd like to ask. Here's my last question. There's a couple young kids that are down the street in the inner city that are sitting in this beautiful restaurant today with us. You're both uniquely, you understand that challenge that these kids have. What do you think some of their unique issues and challenges are for them to break out of that situation that they're in, to maybe one day being able to lead a bank, or maybe someday become a real estate developer?
You know, for me, it's about having people feel like they can achieve, giving people hope. And you do that in lots of different ways. I'm thinking right now about my grandson who was over 2 weekends ago, and he said, Papa, he loves what do you call it, Transformers, and he takes them apart and puts them together. He's very good with his hands, and you know, that sort of inclination. And he said, Papa, when I grow up, I want to be a mechanic. And I said, Noah, that's great. I hope that you're going to be a good mechanic, but you know what? I want you to be an engineer. I don't want you to just fix cars. I want you to design and make cars. And he said, oh, what's an engineer? And so we started having that conversation. And maybe it's because it's my favorite, my grandson. And, I feel this way, but I really think that many kids, particularly kids in the inner city, don't have someone saying to them, you can do this. Rather, they have people saying, you know, you better straighten up, you better do this, you better do that. And so that's what the message is for me.
You know, when I speak to in the city, children, mainly black children, I tell them that you lack the work ethic, and I'm very blunt with them. And I tell them you lack the work ethic because I remember my father coming home, and he would eat, and he was so tired, he would lay on the couch and immediately went to bed. So subconsciously, I said to myself, when I grow up, I've got to be like my father. Subconsciously, I gotta work. I said, you poor kids don't have fathers in your houses. And that's what you've gotta break. You've gotta break that cycle. Yes, you can be out of poverty. There's only two things you have to do. You have to finish high school, and you can't get anyone pregnant, and you can't be pregnant. All right? If you do those three things, you will not be in poverty. And then you will be a role model. I did not like Obama at all for a whole bunch of reasons. But the one thing I loved about him is that he was a role model to young black boys that never had one to look up to. They would have a mother and a grandmother at home. They didn't have a male to look at. And this guy was just terrific for them. So for that one thing, I love the guy now, okay? But that's what I tell these kids. That's the message I pass on.
How about a question from the group? Does anyone have something they'd like to? Let me bring the mic over to you so we all hear it.
Thank you. I find that both of your stories are really inspiring. The thing I wonder about is you have this thought about we and including everybody, and how you, because I guess I see you at the top, the really top of your corporations and your businesses. How do you instill that all the way down? Because how do you bring that we, this sense of unity?
You have to sincerely like people that work for you. And you have to walk by them in the morning when you see them and say, good morning. How often people kill themselves to hire somebody? Oh, this is a great place to work, you're gonna love it. And they walk right by the person, they don't even look at them in the eyes. Okay? You know? So I make a point to walk around in the morning and look everyone's in the eyes, because eye contact is important, and say, good morning. Everybody okay? We're gonna have a great day today. So you do it by example, you know, but you can't fake it. All right, you got to be sincere about it, because people are very smart, and if you think you're going to con them, you're not going to con them, and you're not going to have that kind of organization that you want. Okay?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I agree. It's modeling. It's, you know, being true to yourself. One lesson I learned in my career, this is when I was working for Fleet Bank. Everyone hated working there, including the leaders. Everyone hated it. And if you ask them about the bank, everyone from the top down had the same kind of answer, and it was never anything positive. One of the things I learned throughout my career was people will respond to what you put out there. And if you put out there that our organization is you know, for the individual, it's not about teamwork, it's not about what's best for all of us. If that's what you put out there, that's pretty much what you're gonna get. Conversely, every one of my teammates here, we call ourselves teammates at the bank, know that it's in our value statements, it's in our mission statement, teamwork. And so, for us anyway, the way that you kind of get through that, you know, the I versus we is by talking about it and then rewarding it.
Thank you both for, again, giving of yourselves to spend some time with us today. It's been our honor to have you here.
John, before you go, I am going to ask one question, and I don't want to get political on this, but our state's at a crossroad right now, as we speak. You can't go anywhere. You can't take these 40 buildings and move them south. Your bank isn't going anywhere. Right? We're committed to making this work. We have some problems, we have some bright people. In 2 sentences, your prescription.
Be less political. Be realistic. I spend a fair amount of time down in Washington, D.C., meeting with the FDIC and the Federal Reserve and some other organizations. If you're inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C., I know you're talking about Connecticut, it is palpable that whole city operates by politics. It's not about what's best for you and me and what's best for the citizens of the country. It's about what's best for the party. Conversely, here in Connecticut, politics is what gets in the way of making good, normal, sound business decisions that these individual legislators, if they were running their own business, wouldn't do for their own business what they're doing to the state.
Socrates said 500 years before the birth of Christ, Socrates says, the price you pay for not being involved in politics is to be governed by idiots. That's 500 years before Christ. Okay? All right? That's the price you pay. And that's the price we pay right now in this state. Okay? You know, the Speaker of the House, who happens to be a Democrat, okay, is the labor coordinator for the unions that represent the state. Okay? Now that's a conflict of interest. How does that happen? Because no one knows those things, because we're not involved. Okay? Now I'm not blaming the Democrats or Republicans because it goes all around. You know, but this state is in a mess. This is a serious problem, and we got to get focused here. Okay?
Thank you, gentlemen. A round of applause for Alfred. Listen, I read Chandler's bio with interest. I know outside of his day job, he drives a Harley, and he also sings in the church choir. So as we get ready to head over back to the auditorium, I want to leave you with a song. I'm singing in the rain, I'm singing in the rain, what a glorious feeling, I'm happy again.